We're moving on to Scientific Sunday. This is all Ryan Rodimer's corner. He's our director of genetic education. He started a blog series for us. We started it 2 weeks ago, kind of did a little bit of Aorta 101. We're going to be talking about a lot of different topics over the next couple weeks. It's very interesting. These are all topics that can be used to have a conversation with your physician. I'm curious to know how much you guys knew about this or where your thoughts are, if you've had your own testing. But this week's was Marfan syndrome and basically understanding the connection to aortic dissection and what you might need to know. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to allow Ryan to do his own live video series about this blog. So I'm not going to read everything. That plus, I think my tongue would get tied because there's that much information. But if you missed the first post that he did, you should really check it out. It's a really good place to start. This is where Ryan laid down the groundwork for the rest of this entire series. So he's going to be talking about some of the terms that he used in that post throughout this series, this post and the rest of the series. So check out the first one if you didn't have a chance. But as he said, let's dive into the world of Marfan syndrome. And as someone who has been affected by type 1 or the type A dissection, Ryan is a genetic counselor, but he's also an aortic dissection survivor. So how lucky are we and how lucky is the public, right? Now you've got somebody who's been doing this as they're living and now they've experienced this firsthand. I say lucky, I'm not sure if he would say it's luck, but he is lucky because he's here to tell the tale. But he knows how important it is to kind of consider and understand Marfan syndrome as a starting point. So a lot of people, even doctors, they might think, which I did, that when you have Marfan, you have to be tall and you have to be thin. We all think of Abraham Lincoln, right? Okay, that's what I think of when I hear of Marfan. I think of good old Abe. And that just because you're tall and you're thin doesn't mean you have Marfan. And just because you have Marfan doesn't mean that you're automatically tall and thin. So these are fallacies that exist, but there's many other reasons why someone could have aortic issues, but Marfan syndrome is just probably the most well-known, and it's just one of them. So in Ryan's journey, he's basically come across many doctors who can't really understand why he didn't have Marfan syndrome himself. I actually had my own doctors in the beginning say, how is this possible? You don't have Marfan syndrome. Did you guys experience that at all or have anybody question Marfan? Did they talk to you about Marfan or offer to test you at all?
Nope.
See, we're still that first generation, and that's still frustrating because I think now we're starting to see that happen more and more, the openness about genetic testing. But, what's so crazy is he says here, even though Marfan wasn't behind his aortic disease, it still ended up noted somewhere in his medical chart. So that's why it's so important to kind of spread the word about this and make sure everybody's heard of Marfan syndrome and understands what Marfan syndrome actually is. This just can't be the healthcare providers. So it really needs to be survivors, family, caregivers. Everybody needs to understand and be aware at least about this condition, whether you're dealing with an aneurysm or you've had a dissection or you think Marfan syndrome could be a related issue. Because remember, you could be patient X. You could be the first one. Our own Bill Barnhart did not have a family history. And he became the first person in his family that had this dissection and ended up having Marfan syndrome. Nobody had it before him. So in this article that I highly recommend everybody read, he's going to actually share his knowledge. Ryan is sharing his knowledge and personal experience to help kind of clear up some of the confusion around this often misunderstood condition. So he talks a lot about Marfan syndrome and how it's actually caused by a mutation in the FBN1 gene. Just picture a big DNA strain, and I'm picturing somewhere on there's like a weird mutation somewhere. But 75% or 3/4 of the time the condition actually is inherited from an affected parent. So that's more likelihood scenario is that you're going to inherit. But 25% of the time, the condition actually occurs because of a new genetic typo in a child. However, that affected child's future could then have a 50-50 chance. So in Bill's case, he had 3 children and only one had has Marfan syndrome. The other 2 do not have it at all. So if
Wow.
you're interested in learning about Marfan and you really want a very easy to read, easy to understand article, you need to check out Ryan's article. He's going to go into symptoms and diagnosis of the muscular skeletal system, cardiovascular system, including eyes, your vision, your pulmonary and other systems. He talks about his history and experience with Marfan syndrome, why people are not understanding it, how getting that diagnosis can be frustrating, not getting the diagnosis can be frustrating. So you really want to check this out. There's a lot of easy to understand information. And if you end up having a question like, could I have Marfan syndrome? I had a dissection. Here's some things I've been thinking about. Talk to your physician, bring up the article, even ask the question, because there's information in here as well about diagnosis, management, treatment, how you want to have regular checkups and monitoring, which we all do, how there might be medication and lifestyle modifications, surgical options, psychological, emotional support. He covers everything, especially genetic testing and counseling, and why it's so important when it comes to Marfan syndrome and how you can live with Marfan syndrome. I mean, everything is in here. Check it out. This is our second blog from our genetics series from Ryan Rodimer. Can't wait to see what he puts out in the next 2 weeks. But any questions about Marfan, this is where you need to go and check it out. Do you ladies have any questions about Marfan syndrome?
No questions. I just wanted to say this is an extremely understandable way. He's just very good at putting out this information so that anybody can understand it. He spells things out very clearly and concisely, and it's beautifully written, and it is an easy to read and digest material.
And you know what's interesting is I think I have the stats kind of sort of right, but even still, with all of this in-depth information, having a known genetic mutation or condition only represents still about 30% of the population of people with aortic disease issues. There's still 70% of us that have either yet to find out what it is, or it could have been trauma related or something like that, but we just don't necessarily have a known reason for it. And at the end of the day, we should still be treated as if we have that golden ticket when we walk in the door. So that's part of other things that we do here at Aortic Hope, is just hopefully give you the tools that if you don't have a condition like Marfan, that you learn how to advocate for yourself when you have to go to the ER. You know, I've heard you talk a lot about that too, Diane. Push your way in the door.
Absolutely. Yep.
So check out this article from Ryan again. Thank you so much, Ryan, for taking the time to write it. Very well written. I agree with you, Jenny. Good educational stuff.
He says, it's cool. I'm lucky. And then he's got a smiley face emoji going on.
Oh,
I said, I think so too. We're lucky to have you.
I think it's a little bit more than cool. A lot of cool. And thank you.